So, an official welcome to everybody who's joined us here today. I am Mark Gilfix. This is Michael Gilfix here with me. We're here to talk today about long-term care, something that affects virtually every family in America, and Medi-Cal and asset protection techniques, tools, and rules they have to be aware of, and some big deadlines that are coming up in California, major deadlines, and you have to be aware of these, and you may need to take action before the end of this year. We'll talk specifically about that. And I think long-term care sounds kind of like a dry issue, like, oh, long-term care, whatever. This affects almost everybody. These are real statistics. Over 70% in America, over 70% of individuals over the age of 65 will need some type of long-term care, which generally speaking just means a type of care that's not going to go away. You break your leg, you have rehab, whatever, that's care, but it ends quickly. You have surgery, you rehab from that ends, that care ends. Long-term care is just as you have more physical or mental limitations, you need ongoing support that, if anything, is going to become more acute and more necessary over time rather than less. So this is something we all have to be aware of, whether you're the person who's worried about it for yourself, or if you're the child or the grandchild of the person who may need this and will need this. This talk is important for you to watch. And 3 points I always like to make in all of our presentations. One, hope is not a strategy. Hope that everything will just work out, that everything is going to be fine, is not a strategy. I'm a former management consultant. Don't have that approach to life. Things might work out, but let's go to number 2 and let's control what we can control. There's a lot in this world that we cannot control. We can't control the stock market. We can't control the weather. We can't control international politics or international wars or things like that. But we can control a lot more than we think, especially when it comes to estate and long-term care planning. We're going to talk about some of those tools you can deploy now. And these are high leverage decisions and moments when you're figuring out your long-term care plan, when you're figuring out how to pay for it. These are the types of decisions and steps you can take that can have massive impacts for multiple generations. It can be the difference between a family going bankrupt and a family preserving all that mom and dad or grandma and grandpa have worked for so many decades. So these are really, really important issues. And before we get into that, Mike, I know we've written articles on this, but let's just talk about the different generational approach to this. So as you're talking about this from the elder generation, so why don't you, what are your thoughts about this as we think about this as a multi-generational?
Yeah, the first thing I'd like to really emphasize is that everybody on this call is blessed. And what I mean by that is that whether you have a huge estate or a small estate, you're getting information that is relevant to your lives. You're learning about what can be done, and that's very much within our control, the point that Mark emphasized just a little bit earlier. So regardless of decisions you make, information and having options is power. I think it's good for our health. So we're going to convey not everything, because this topic is so complicated, but we'll convey the essence and give you some good ideas. From my perspective, the elder perspective, so 30% of us won't need some form of long-term care. Everything will be great until we check out, but we all know about the issue. We all worry about it, every single one of it. If we don't, our head's in the sand, and that's not realistic. So, I am concerned about my dignity. I mean, money, yeah, sure, of course, but my dignity, quality of care. I want to know that there's going to be options for me, and that whatever my wishes are, whatever they are, as long as they're doable, practical, I want to know they're going to be respected to the greatest extent possible. Got that, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So just check. What a great opportunity to share that thought. So again, I don't want to be stupid. I want to know what I can do. I want to know how I can control things. So, it's a heavy topic. It has nuances. Every family is different. Every family has issues. Yeah. And when we go through the planning process, I can't overemphasize, there is no one set of options that fits everybody. Every family is different. There's issues in every family about who gets what and who's going to be doing what and who has guilt and who doesn't. I mean, all of these things. So I think about these things. I think most of us, as we age, we do. And then there's the perspective of the next generation. So Mark, what do you how would you represent that, your generation?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of us are worried about that, the idea of being the sandwich generation, where you have your own kids to take care of and you have to take care of mom and dad. Many of my friends are getting into that position. I'm in my late 40s now, which is crazy. And I just had a son of my own. And it's something that I think many families are blindsided by. And when you're the next generation, it can be really, really hard if mom and dad didn't plan or didn't communicate much. I think there's too many families that don't talk about this. So I think we do, but I think it's important that we continue to talk about it. But what you don't want is to cause conflict. And I think what we see a lot, and I'm actually speaking with a New York Times reporter, they've written a series of stories and they reached out to us about this, about how families navigate caregiving and inheritance. That's a big deal. So we're not focusing so much on inheritance here, but I can certainly tell you that if you don't plan ahead and you burn through everything, there's not going to be anything there. You're more likely to face conflict in the family. So planning ahead and talking about this. Mike and I have co-authored articles and books about this. We talk about multi-generational planning. Communicating is so key because we see too often, there's maybe two or three kids, one kid steps up, the other two don't do anything, but then they're bitter that one kid is sort of favored in the plan, or not, that kid's bitter because they weren't favored in the plan. And people have to give up their lives sometimes if you don't plan ahead. So these are heavy issues, and there is a lot of guilt of, like, as the next generation, it's not all about money, but yeah, sure. I hope there's some money left that my parents worked so hard for, but yet they have to get great care. But yet, is throwing money at the problem the best way to do it, or can we be smarter about this? Where do there's these feelings of guilt, but also, am I doing enough? But am I not doing enough? It's hard. So I think talking about it, communicating is just so key. And we're going to lay out some of the tools you need to have in place and how to avoid those issues down the road. We can't avoid every issue, but I'm thinking about this stuff in real time as we talk about this, Dad. So this will be good for me to hear your perspective again. So let's go over the subjects we're going to cover here today. It's not going to be too much, but well, it's a lot. And if you have questions, again, enter them in the Q&A function in Zoom. And if you're watching this later on our YouTube channels, we will post this. You can enter it in the comments section. We'll try to get to those later. So what are we talking about here today? The spectrum of long-term care. What do we mean? What are the different areas of long-term care? How do you pay for it? How much does it cost? I mean, that's a huge, huge issue. And how can you stay at home? A lot of people say, well, I want to stay at home when I need long-term care. How can you do that? Or should you even do that? And then what are some of the ways you can get help from the government? Medi-Cal eligibility, the rules, and they're changing. What are some of the deadlines we have to understand? What can we do before those deadlines? What can we do after them? And some action steps and some recommendations really for every family. So covering a lot, but communicate. That's one thing we recommend. And make sure you plan ahead. Don't wait till there's a crisis. And we always have to point, this is for educational purposes only. It's nonpartisan. This does not create a legal relationship that we have to work with you formally to be your attorney and to give actual legal advice. This is really just to inform you and empower you. And we hope we get the chance to help you beyond that. But hopefully this gives you a lot of information that you can use to protect yourself and your family. So let's talk about this. Actually, for those of you who don't know us, just really quickly, we've been around for a long time, over 40 years. Our firm is Gilfix and Lepole Associates. It's not just Mike and I. We have Francis Lepole, who's a principal in the firm, Joshua Lepole, actually his son, an amazing attorney, Jeff Mendelman, another great attorney. We work with thousands and thousands of families in California. We work with, how many thousand on long-term care planning, Mike? Like we've helped so many.
Never kept track. Countless.
Countless. Yeah. Featured in the media all the time. I am actually talking to a New York Times reporter this week. I don't know if they'll quote me, but I am talking about this exact issue, about this. We've written about it. We think about it all the time. We write books about these subjects, special needs planning, estate planning. So if you don't know us, that's who we are. So Mike, let's talk about the spectrum of long-term care.
Let's get into it. Okay. Long-term care is a term that many understand, and it's used very loosely. So let's be clear that long-term care typically means that you need help as you age, or if you have some short or long-term disability. It's the support that you're going to get in a number of different environments. So at one end of the spectrum, so to speak, is home care. You stay at home. You get the help you need, as long as possible, if that is your wish. Assisted living would be the next level, where you live in an apartment. Most of us are familiar with this. The more help you need, the more help you get, the more it costs. This can be $3,000 a month. It can be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month. Board and care facilities. These tend to be single-family homes where there's maybe 3 or 4, at the most 5 bedrooms. Not a lot of support there. You tend to be rather independent, at least in theory. Skilled nursing, of course, is at the other end of the spectrum, and that's where you need a very significant level of care. You can't live independently. You need medical folks nearby. Actually, they're 24 hours a day. So big difference between these various categories. And the overarching category, by the way, is many of you are familiar with what are called continuing care retirement communities, CCRCs. The most expensive one around here is the V, which is adjacent to the Stanford Shopping Center. Some affiliations with Stanford. There's many others. There's a Channing House. There's 5 or 6 in the immediate community. And the idea with that is you move in living independently. If you need more help, you get a higher level of help, and you might be in the assisted living section. If need be, you might go into the skilled nursing. Usually they don't use that term, by the way. They'll speak in terms of healthcare, the health center. Usually some nice euphemism, but that's what it is. And the benefit of this approach, at least in theory, is that you're going to one location, you're going to be there, you and your spouse can both go there if you're married, and it has the blessing of continuity. There's some exceptions. Sometimes it doesn't work, but generally it does. The cost can be massive. There are a couple of nonprofits in the state where it's a relatively modest buy-in and you're going to be guaranteed the right to stay there regardless. It can be a few $1,000,000 to buy into some of these facilities. And then you have a monthly cost. And then if you need extra care, it'll cost more. So your eyes just have to be open in terms of what you're going to get and not get. With continuing care retirement communities, it is a virtual given that there will be no Medi-Cal coverage for the highest level of care. And by the way, Medi-Cal, that is California's version of the federal Medicaid program. So when you read and hear about Medicaid being discussed at the national level, that's Medi-Cal here in California. We're just cute the way we title the program. So
confusing.
Where you are makes a huge difference in terms of what benefits are available and what the cost might be. So what is right? How do you go about making these choices? And what are your criteria? What do you really worry about? Quality of care. I mean, that's what we care about. You have to know and believe that you're going to get the support you need. And this is actually very complicated. Even in the best of nursing homes, for example, there's no one-to-one staff to patient ratio. And if 4 people hit the bell at the same time, there's only 2 people available to go take care of you. So no place is perfect. Let's be clear. You need an advocate. You need somebody who's going to be watching out for you at all times. Staying at home is not a guarantee that you're going to get quality care. There are countless examples of some very famous individuals. I think Groucho Marx, by the way, was one of them, who stayed at home. And I think the term isolated luxury fit him very well. He was protected. Some would say he was isolated from others. And it's a risk. Again, there is no one perfect solution except when you have your family involved, a comprehensive plan that's really followed.
And actually, I just want to point out, I think the vast majority of people think, I want to stay at home. And I totally get that. Who wants to leave their home? It feels like you're getting taken away from your space. You're losing independence. You have to take on neighbors and all sorts of things. But the reality is, I think a lot of studies show that staying at home is often not the right thing. That when you find the right community with the right support, the right advocates, you're not socially isolated. One of the key ways we stay young and achieve longevity is having connection to other people and having a purpose. And that's sometimes for some people it works at home, but I think a lot of people it doesn't work at home. So if you're not at home and you are at a facility, that doesn't guarantee good care, right? So what can family members do to ensure or to do their best to maximize the odds someone gets good care at a continuing care facility or anywhere?
This is a phrase that I coined 35 years ago. I have early articles where I said the key to quality care in a nursing home, for example, is cookies and thorns. And what the heck does that mean? Well, it means that somebody has to visit often. You bring cookies for the staff, so they know you, so they're looking forward to your visit. So you're not one of those 13 anonymous family members who drop by occasionally. And the thorn part, that means that you're always a gentle and sometimes harsh thorn in their side. If you see something that isn't right, whether it's your loved one or not, you have to call them on it. You have to make sure that quality, it's the rising tide. I mean, if quality is good for your parent and the next door neighbor, it's probably going to be better for everybody. One of my favorite stories, by the way, was a unique individual, a lady, an only child, and what she would do occasionally, in addition to visiting her mom every day, every week or so, she would put on a wig, dress a little bit outrageously, drop in the middle of the night. And she had the staff convinced that that lady had two daughters, and one of them was a little crazy. So that was her way of that. I mean, that was profoundly perceptive, I thought.
And they were on top of
They
it.
knew her. They knew her, to say the
A little
least.
scared. And by the way, that's not just nursing homes. I mean, if you're in the have a loved one in the hospital, I think having a
Oh,
patient
absolutely.
advocate is so crucial. We've given talks about that. My mother, Myra Gerson Gilfix, has done a lot of writing about that. So it's kind of just being an advocate, But I love the cookies and thorns. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that resonates as
And
people
this
hear
goes,
that. So
by the way, this goes to the contents of your advance directive. These are not check the box little forms. We'll come back to that and talk more about it a little bit
yeah.
later.
And now let's
Okay, let's
let's
talk about how to
transition.
pay for the cost of care.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's on a lot of people's mind. And we get this all the time. Well, long-term care is probably really expensive. How do I pay for it? Let's go over the different categories.
Okay. So obviously, your pocket can pay for the
Yeah.
cost of long-term care. And again, there's so many subdivisions of the term long-term care. You might need somebody to do the laundry and help you with food at home. That is not classic long-term care, but it's support that you get at home. And typically, you're paying for that. So your pocket, whether you're at home, in assisted living, in any level of care, your pocket is the go-to presumptive source of money to pay for all of these things. What if you have long-term care insurance, which years ago we were skeptics and critics, but no longer. We're now to the point where we think it's, generally speaking, a good idea. Partly it's the cost of care, having options. Most policies, not all, will provide for care at home. And be aware, you have to need a very high level of care before these policies kick in. There's something called ADLs, activities of daily living. And these are the fundamentals of life. Can you get out of bed and get dressed? Can you toilet yourself? Can you feed yourself? I mean, really the basics. So policies typically do not pay unless you need help with three, maybe four of these ADL. So you have to look at the policy so that you know what you're getting and what you're not getting. There's also what's called an elimination period. No benefits for 30 days, 60 days, depends on the policy. But long-term care insurance is indeed a source. You have to be tenacious when you apply for it. They're typically not really quick to say, oh, happy to pay you. That's really not the case. They're insurance companies. They're not in the business of automatically paying out all the money they possibly can. But it's part of the answer. What about Medicare? Medicare is not a source of payment for any ongoing needs for long-term care. There's something called a PACE program. We'll get to that a little bit later. It can pay for nursing home care for a very limited period of time. Very limited period of time. And
Yeah,
there's
but
exceptions to every statement here.
yeah, but that I think that's a big misnomer. Something it's very important to point out, though. Everybody gets Medicare as they get older, but it does not pay for long-term care, and I think many people mistakenly think that it will. So just
Yeah.
put that out there.
Year after year, AARP does surveys, and the last one I looked at was a couple of years ago, and still a majority of Americans age 65 and over thought that Medicare was going to pay for the cost of nursing home care, and it doesn't. Maybe a few days, but it doesn't. So it really comes down to the federal Medicaid program. That's the only program that is designed, among other things, to pay for the cost of long-term care. And again, we call it Medi-Cal here in California. You have to qualify. It's no panacea, but it is the source of last resort, or sometimes with good planning, it's a source of a first resort, depending on your needs and where you might be placed if you need this level of care. Let's focus a little bit more on this staying at home concept. Because again, we can't overemphasize the fact that nothing's simple. It sounds right for everybody. And so many folks say, I want to be at home. That's right for me. I'm going home. Doesn't matter what. I'm going to stay at home. My kids will take care of me. Spend everything. Yeah, that's the case with many individuals. But what about the cost? It can be more expensive than nursing home care.
Yeah.
We have countless examples. If somebody needs 24/7 care and you have to have a medical person there, you go through an agency, $35, $40 an hour. It's serious money. Mark's already talked about this issue of whether or not it's safe to be at home. Is it a good thing or is it not? Are
Yeah,
you
what? Yeah.
isolated? And is that a good thing? Usually not.
Do you have stairs in your home that you can navigate? We have a lot of clients who want to move, downsize from a two floor home, or they're putting in master bedrooms downstairs where they used to be upstairs. What if you fall? That alone can be massively problem.
That
Sorry,
reminds me,
didn't mean to.
as many of you know, we have a no falling rule.
Yeah.
I can't be more serious. One fall and we're toast in some cases. So
This is a crazy statistic. If someone, I think it's over the age of, I don't know, 75, falls and breaks their hip, the prognosis is the same or worse than many types of stage 4 cancer. That we don't frame it the right way. Do not fall. And if being in a facility helps prevent that, maybe that's the right thing.
and this goes to our egos, especially us guys. We're macho. We can handle it. We're not going to fall. We honestly, we have a walker at our house just in case. Use it. Use your cane. Use your walker. Don't fall. It's in your self-interest. Very, very, very important. Okay, what about how can you pay for home care? Medi-Cal has a program. In California, we call it IHSS, In-Home Support Services, and it can provide some level of care. Often it's most available for younger people with disabilities, but it is available. You have to qualify, and then you'll be allocated some hours. A good thing about the IHSS program is that you can hire a family member and they can be paid. They're not paid the maximum rate that somebody would be paid if they worked through an agency, but 14, 18 bucks an hour. If you have a grandkid or a niece or a nephew providing care at home anyway, if you can qualify for IHSS, they'll be paid by that program. So it's worth thinking about. PACE is a program. It stands for Programs for All-Inclusive Care of the Elderly. It's designed for people who would otherwise have to be in a nursing home, but they're willing to put together a plan to stay at home. You usually have to give up your doctor. You have a doctor through the program. You have to have a few compromises here and there. It's not easy to get into. Medicare can cover the cost. Medi-Cal can cover the cost. Rarely is it utilized. We do have a PACE program here. We're based in Santa Clara County. We do have one here. It should be on the list, and it's in our book. It's explained in our book more completely. Careful planning, just can't emphasize. We'll go through Mark will go through some of the documents you need to have in place and update if you want to maximize this idea of staying at home. All right. So let's move on to facility-based care and talk about what you can get covered by programs and what you cannot. If you're in assisted living, you're on your own. I mean, by definition, you're able to get around, you're somewhat ambulatory, so your long-term care insurance policy 95% of the time is not going to be available to you because your level of need isn't that great. Save for board and care. For licensing purposes, again, you have to be ambulatory. You have to be able to get out of there if there's a fire or something. So almost by definition, that means that your level of care doesn't rise to the level of where you need help with these ADLs, these activities of daily living. So you're usually on your own to pay for the cost of care. Now, it can be significantly less than others. You have to be really careful about quality, visit often, here we go again, making sure that if you can't visit, you hire someone to visit. Hire a social worker, hire someone who knows what to look for. That can be one of the best ways to use money. Again, remember, we're talking not about saving money and getting Medi-Cal. We're talking about using your assets wisely, using programs that make sense for you and will deliver quality of care and make a positive difference. It doesn't mean save every penny. It means use the resources you have, use them wisely.
And I think that's a really important point, Mike, especially from a multi-generational standpoint, and the guilt idea that when we're talking about saving assets, this is not about saving as much as possible for the next generation, although that's great if you can. But the way that we always look at it, because when we're working with our clients, we're not there to represent their kids. Their kids are not our clients, unless we're working with the family in a different way. But we're there to maximize the odds the parent gets great care. And so protecting assets, keeping it in the family, means that family members can and should use assets that are saved while mom and dad are alive to help supplement that care. So it's not about, when we say like saving assets, keep in mind, like, and I hopefully you like that I'm talking about this, Dad, but it's not about saving things for the kids and grandkids, although yes, that's great. But when we're doing planning, we are not there to serve them. We are there to make sure as much as possible is there for you. And that depends on family dynamics. So when we're talking about costs this high, it's a big deal. Every dollar we can save and get help from government programs you've paid into your whole life, that's huge. That's money that can be used to help support your care in ways that those programs can't. So let's talk about what the cost per month can be. And the cost of long-term care, it's only skyrocketing, right? I'd have to look at the most recent data, but I'm almost certain it's outpaced even inflation. And
Oh
inflation
yeah.
has been crazy. And, this is a nonpartisan statement, but, the government has cracked down on immigration. It's cracked down on people who are here in the States, depending on their citizen status or not. And what does that do? It dramatically, I think, reduces the pool of people who can serve as caregivers. The vast majority of caregivers are immigrants. And it's already super expensive. So as that group of people who is available for this labor pool shrinks, the costs are only going to go up. So what are the costs per month? This is not per year. This is per month. So home care, you've talked about it, Mike. That might be anything from someone coming in a couple times a week just to help out to 24/7 care. So the cost can be $1,000 a month to $15,000 or more. We've seen people with over $25,000 a month in costs. Nursing home, I think it goes without saying, the cost there can be extraordinarily high. I mean, the 10,000 is probably not anywhere near the Bay Area. I don't think there's a nursing home in the Bay Area that's as cheap as $10,000 a month. We've certainly seen $20,000 a month or more. Assisted living is in that range too, by the way. It's not up here, but the cost per month of care, no matter where you are, we have seen couples spending over $500,000 per year on care. There's a couple, wasn't it right, Mike, in the V? Both of them required 24/7 support. Both of them were spending over $20,000 per month separately. So add that up, and they had a large estate, and it went away very quickly. So the cost is just so insane. And when we talk about what can we do to pay for it, we talk about Medicare will not cover this. One of the amazing tools that's available is Medi-Cal, the California version of the federal Medicaid program. Let's go into the eligibility rules for that, because I think that is really key. That's something I think many people are here for. So, Mike, let's talk about what the rules are now, what the deadlines are, and where it's going soon, and what we can do about this. So let's start with Medi-Cal planning right now.
And actually, I'm going to take a second and take us back a couple of years, because it's been the case for years, and you might be familiar with what I'm about to say, because historically, an individual couldn't qualify for the Medi-Cal program unless that individual was down to $2,000 in her name. $2,000. Yeah. Now, the spouse at home could also have some assets, a reasonable level of protection, so that spouse doesn't become impoverished, but $2,000 was the cap. Now, this year, a remarkable thing, I mean, every time I say this, I can hardly believe it, but our California legislature eliminated the asset cap on eligibility for the Medi-Cal program. Only in California can you have any amount of money and qualify for the Medi-Cal program if somebody's in the skilled nursing facility. So everybody qualifies. That doesn't mean you should qualify. It doesn't mean the facility you're in accepts Medi-Cal. Many nursing homes don't. So I'm going to say again and again and again, Medi-Cal is not a panacea. It's a resource you have to know about. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. When it does make sense, when and to what extent? I mean, very, very, very complicated. Okay, let's say a little bit about income. So even if somebody qualifies for the Medi-Cal program this year, and by the way, in California, we only look at assets to determine eligibility. We ignore income. In some states, it's very different. What you're learning here today does not apply in any other state in the country. Let's be real clear. Some states use an income test, which we do not. In California, once you qualify for Medi-Cal, then they look at your income. And if you're a single person, this oversimplifies the rule. But other than $35 that you get to keep as your needs allowance to pay for odds and ends, all of your income is what's called the share of cost. In other words, all of that income is paid to the nursing home as your share of the cost, and then Medi-Cal picks up the difference, whatever that may be. So if the Medi-Cal approved rate is, oversimplify, $10,000, and your available income is $2,000, Medi-Cal is going to pay $8,000. Now, the private rate in that facility may be $12,000, but the Medi-Cal rate is $10,000. So moving targets, just being aware of what the eligibility issues are today. Now, what if you qualify today? Are you in for life? Not necessarily, because there's what's called an annual redetermination. Every year, they re-examine your eligibility. And if next year your assets are too high, we'll get into those rules in a moment, you could lose your eligibility. So it isn't you're in, you're done. It's that you're in right now, and then you have to do additional planning, perhaps, for next year if you want to maintain eligibility for the Medi-Cal program.
Yeah, and there is a big change coming. So that's, I think, what also many people are very curious and concerned about. So in 2026, the rules are changing January 1st, 2026. The rules Mike just talked about, no asset tests, go away. So Mike, what happens on January 1st, 2026?
Huge change, still very liberal. Only in California will an individual be able to retain up to $130,000 in countable assets. So in the past, it was 2,000. This year, it's anything. Next year, it's $130,000. So that's for the individual who would be in the facility, generally in the legislation referred to as the institutionalized spouse. The other spouse is the community spouse, and that spouse can also have $65,000 in addition to the $130,000. And the statement of policy, the way this is interpreted by the state Medi-Cal program, actually uses the term household members. So if there happens to be a disabled child living in the home as well, that's another $65,000. But to keep it simple for today, it's $130,000 for the spouse applying, $65,000 for the other spouse. Now, we mentioned countable assets because many assets don't count. There's a list of them in our book, many of them. The most significant exempt asset is the residence of any value in California. So the home doesn't apply, doesn't count. What about retirement money? California. In California, as long as you're taking out the RMD, as long as you're taking out benefits, and you have to be taking them out unless you have a Roth, you're taking money out. If that's the case, the money in your IRA also doesn't count. So, to think about that for just a moment. Okay, let's say you have a $4 million house and $1 million in your IRA. That's a $5 million estate, and you can keep that and qualify for Medi-Cal. That was the case 3 years ago, 5 years ago. It's the case under the new rules. Caveat, we're going to come back to this caveat time and again. California, in myriad ways, is out of compliance with federal Medicaid law. The amount an individual can keep out of compliance. Federal law says that a residence is exempt so long as its value is about $750,000 or less. So show me a house in the Bay Area worth $750,000 or less. It doesn't exist. So the point there is that California is very forgiving. The federal government could come down on the state and say, hey, you can't do that anymore. And virtually everybody who owns a home and kept it because you can, would lose eligibility, and then dramatic changes would have to be made to retain eligibility. There are other exempt assets. There are many other questions very simply subsumed under this one slide. Again, no effort to go through all the rules. We go through countless issues in the book, and our presumption, very important part, our presumption, because there's no indication to the contrary, is that the rules as they were in existence before this year that allow certain strategies, we assume they're going to be available. Don't know for sure. Okay.
Yes.
What about gifting? Let's talk about it for just a moment.
Well, and let's take a step back here.
Yeah.
Gifting. So what we mean here, and when you refer to the book, we wrote a book on long-term care. We didn't actually show an image of that, so sorry, that was confusing. We do talk about that in depth on a book. We haven't updated it for a few years because the rules have been changing so much. We're going to do a new version of that probably this year. So when we're talking about gifting, so this goes to becoming eligible if you're not eligible now. So we talked about a few years ago, you could have only $2,000 in countable assets. So if anybody with any money in their bank account was over the limit. But going forward, if you're an individual, you have over that $130,000 in countable assets, what can you do to gift, to get money out of your name, to get under those limits, to get Medi-Cal eligibility? So that's what we're talking about here. Sorry, just with that context, for those who aren't familiar with how gifting is involved with Medi-Cal. So 2025, what can we do this year before the end of the year?
Conceptually, it is consistent with the idea of having no asset cap.
Yeah.
And achieving eligibility to allow a person to give away assets. Because if you can have anything, it doesn't matter if you give it away. That actually makes an internal sense. Okay, so the rule is, this is the statement from the state Medi-Cal program, that if an individual makes a gift this year, it's not going to impact eligibility next year. It's like invisible. Now, this does not mean, I can't overemphasize, this does not mean that somebody should go out there and start giving away their assets. The rules could change overnight. There are many tax issues that have to be considered. Mom and dad, whoever the elder is, needs to thoroughly understand the implications of making major gifts. And that's a major point. We never say, oh, give it away. Oh, you'll get eligible. Never, ever, ever. We're going to talk with the individual, make sure you're comfortable with this idea, make sure that you believe if you want your assets to be available in your kids' hands, objectively, realistically, is that going to happen? So I can't tell you how hard we hit this point to be sure that you're comfortable for legitimate reasons in making any and that you understand the tax implications, serious tax implications. So again, can't overemphasize that. Now,
and what happens in 2026? Yes.
Yeah. Next year, what if it's next year and you decide to make gifts to achieve eligibility, or you just made gifts and you didn't know about eligibility, but you made the gifts? What's the impact going to be? The assumption, because we've seen nothing to the contrary, is that the rules that existed in place before the change, that this year allowed for unlimited eligibility, that those rules will remain intact. They are complicated. There are many, many, many of them. Let me give you one example that I think makes the point very profoundly and very simply. Under the rules that pre-existed and that we believe will be in place for gifts made after January 1, 2026 going forward, subject to who knows what, let's assume a person has $100,000 too much, has $230,000, and says, oh, I'll just make a gift of $100,000. I'll get down to $130,000 and writes a check for $100,000. Okay, that gift is going to make that person ineligible for Medi-Cal for maybe 8 or 9 months. So there's a period of ineligibility, multi-months. And if they did that, they'd have to use their other money to pay for care. Not the worst thing in the world. They have $130,000 remaining. But let's instead say that they do something very different. And what I'm about to say, you're going to say, oh, God, Mike, that doesn't make sense. Agreed. Okay. But it's the rule. Okay. So if instead of writing a check for $100,000, they write 5 checks within the same month for $20,000, and they still give away $100,000. When they're asked on the Medi-Cal application, did you make any gifts in the prior 30 months, not 60 months, that's federal Medicaid law. In California, it's 30 months. They'll be asked about those gifts, and you report these 5 gifts of $20,000 each. A gift of $20,000 makes an individual ineligible for Medi-Cal in California for only 1 month. Well, okay, so the first gift did that. They look at the second gift. It also makes that person ineligible for 1 month, and so forth for 5 gifts. California does not aggregate them. So each 1 month period of ineligibility, if all the gifts are made in 1 month, it's a 1 month period of ineligibility, not 8 months, not 9 months, not 10 months, 1 month. I'm the messenger here. We're not creating the law.
And be
so it's
very
an option
careful.
Available to anyone who's careful about this.
Yes, be careful about documentation. Like, don't try this at home necessarily. We've helped a lot of families with this, but don't try this at home per se, because little mistakes can completely undo all the work. But it's pretty crazy, and it doesn't make a lot of logical sense. And so let's just talk about what action steps. So kind of getting to the concluding section of our presentation, we do have some questions we'll get to in a bit. What are some action steps? Here, I'll share this slide. And some strategies families might consider before the end of 2025, or if you're watching this after 2025, well, we'll get to 2026 in just a moment. But what are some steps you might consider? And let me just start here, by the way. In 2025, make sure your estate plan is up to date, because you might be watching this saying, this is all nice, but I don't need long-term care now. I hope I don't need it for many years. So I don't want to have to start giving assets away or do anything like that, or apply for Medi-Cal now. Well, let's make sure your estate plan is up to date. That's your trust. That's your power of attorney. That's your advance directive. And when we're talking about long-term care issues, they need to address that. And by that, I mean in the power of attorney. This is the document that allows you to name the people who can step in to manage your day-to-day business of life issues. If you are incapacitated and you name, let's say, your son as the person, as your attorney, in fact, in the power of attorney, the person you name can only do what you've empowered them to do. So your power of attorney has to address long-term care and asset protection tools. If you don't say in your power of attorney, I am giving you, son, permission to transfer my assets within the family for Medi-Cal eligibility purposes, they can't do it. So we have clients who come in and they say, my mom is in a nursing home and we need her to get Medi-Cal. She's over the limit. What can I do? I have power of attorney. Well, we look at that power of attorney, and if it does not include provisions that allow that child to do what we're talking about on their behalf, they can't really do it. There's really very few roads. Sometimes we can find ways to do it, but largely speaking, you need to make sure your estate plan is up to date. Your trust, your power of attorney, your advance directive, they address these issues. So if you haven't looked at your documents for a while, come talk to us. We can help you with that. So with that said, that's for those who are, I don't need this now, but I maybe need this in the future. Mike, if you do need this more near term, what else might you do before the end of 2025?
Right. And the presumption, in light of what Mark just said, is that an individual signing a power of attorney, giving that kind of authority, which is very powerful, has been counseled about it, understands what the implications are, and is willing to sign it. It is not put into a form and say, sign here. Again, can't overemphasize that. This is heavy duty. If somebody's going to think about giving away your money, you don't do that blithely. You do that only after you're carefully informed. Okay, so what are some of the action steps if somebody applies for Medi-Cal this year? Sorry about it being so late in the year, but things have been moving very quickly, and we are very busy in this office on countless levels and countless areas of law. If you apply this year, again, no asset cap if somebody's in a skilled nursing facility. So if the application is submitted before the end of the year, even if it takes months or weeks or months to get approval, it's retroactive. Eligibility has always been retroactive to the date of the application. We are slammed here, by the way. We are not in a position to do 30 Medi-Cal applications. I know that might seem inconsistent with the presentation, but we have to be clear about a few things. Okay, what about asset transfers this year? Possibly, not without careful advice about tax implications, about many, many, many other implications. What about income? A quick word about that. I'll give one simple example to make the point. And I mentioned earlier this share of cost, again, which means that for an individual, virtually all of that person's income is going to go to the nursing home. So what if that person has a very large RMD, is taking out money from the retirement account? Well, that money might go to the nursing home as part of the share of cost because it's income to you. All right. In some cases, just to give a sense of what is sometimes done, if the math is done and you analyze the situation very carefully, it sometimes makes sense to cash out all or most of your IRA, pay the income tax once, you have to pay it sooner or later anyway, and then you pretty much eliminate or at least substantially reduce the amount of income you're getting from the IRA because it's all going to go to the nursing home anyway. And it doesn't change your quality of care. Medi-Cal is still going to be paying. They'll just pay a little bit more. Your pocket would pay a little bit less. So income is not ignored in the planning process. It's just to say that's not a criterion for determining eligibility. So many elements when we look at planning for Medi-Cal eligibility here. So share of cost. Special needs trusts.
And this is my generation's issue, right? So basically, this is like, let's say we talk about making these gifts, making these transfers, whether you do it before the end of 2025, or again, if you're watching this after that in 2026, paying attention to those transfer rules, you have to be very careful. But once that money's out, again, we are not, when we're working with our clients, we are not serving their kids. Those are not our clients. We're here to make sure that you get the best care. So a lot of the adult kids come to meetings. We encourage that communication. They say, well, if mom and dad are giving me all this money, how can I be sure that this is their money, right? I appreciate that they're giving this to me, but a gift is a gift. You can't force them to give it back. But the kids often say, well, I want to make sure my parents are protected. What if I become incapacitated? And what if I pass away before them? So what can we do? Well, often the kids who receive these gifts done carefully will create a special needs trust for their parents. So I think a lot of people think, well, I only need a special needs trust if I have a child, on the autism spectrum or something along those lines. This is a different context where special needs planning can actually be done by the kids for their parents. So let's say you receive money from your parents to protect those assets for your parents to get Medi-Cal eligibility sooner. What adult children will often do is they'll say, well, if something happens to me before mom and dad are gone, I don't want that money disappearing so it's not available to support them. I want to make sure it goes into a special needs trust that doesn't interfere with public benefits eligibility, doesn't count against those asset limits. It's there to support them and make sure they get extra care beyond what Medi-Cal covers. And when they pass away, it goes back to other family members. The state of California can't touch it. It's going to stay within the family. Or you might even put money in a special needs trust right away to say, I just don't want any risk. Even if I'm still around, mom had given me a gift. You wouldn't do dollar for dollar. Maybe you receive $150,000. You put $100,000 in a special needs trust and say, if I pass away before mom and dad, I'm going to leave money to that special needs trust as well. So it's a way to make sure that if something happens to the kid who should be using those gifts to help support mom and dad, that's really what it's all about, that there's a safety net in case something happens to the kid. So multi-generational planning is something we talk about a lot. Clawback.
Yeah, let's just be clear. So many people worry that, well, if you get Medi-Cal benefits, you still own the house. Won't the state get paid back? Won't we be forced to sell the house? No, with decent planning. It's a very upsetting fact that the only individuals who end up having their Medi-Cal benefits repaid to the state of California are those who are unsophisticated and don't learn about planning. Yep. If an individual owns a home, which is exempt and it doesn't interfere with eligibility, if they don't do a trust, a regular living trust, nothing sophisticated in this case, if they just keep it in their own names and they do a will because they got the will done by the neighborhood lawyer for $90, that means the estate's going to go through probate. And if your estate goes through probate, the state does get its money back. It does. So it's almost like a reverse
regressive tax.
I mean, those who can least afford it are those who are doing the payback. So again, the simple way of avoiding the repayment to the state of California is you have your home and other assets in a revocable trust. Only if there's probate is the payment, does this clawback or repayment to the state come up. So with our clients, it never happens. It's not dodging anything and just taking advantage of an opportunity that the state just gives you. So it's there for the taking. And again, not hard to avoid that. Not hard.
Okay. And let's transition now to...
Now let's go to next year.
2026. Or maybe you're watching this in 2026. But what can you do even after the deadline? This also might apply to you in the sense that you're saying, well, I don't need care now, but I'm worried about care in the future. Or my parents or grandparents don't need care now, but they might need it in the future. So I'll circle back. Again, you have to have an up-to-date estate plan for you or for your parents. Make sure it's up to date. Have you named the right people to step in if and when you need this help? Have you given them the power to do what they might need to do to transfer money within the family or create the right entities or trusts or things like that to protect assets? So you got to make sure your estate plan is up to date just to be sure that those you love and trust can do this on your behalf. Because if you have a very simple plan that doesn't address this or you didn't understand it, they might not be able to do anything once you're incapacitated. So that's critical. But what else can we do, Mike, even in 2026 as these asset tests come back into place?
So there are so many strategies that are allowed by the law. Again, we're the messengers here. I've already mentioned gifting, and if it's done carefully, a series of gifts, which can make a great deal of sense in most cases, not every, that is a way to abbreviate, to shorten any period of ineligibility. So that's point number one. And again, there's tax reporting responsibilities. We'll probably revisit. Mark, let's take a few minutes to go through some of the tax issues like Prop 19, capital gains tax.
Oh,
let's make sure we do touch upon that in a moment. Okay,
we'll do that. Yes.
Let's do that in just a moment to be really clear about how complicated
the tax issues. Flag some of those. Yeah.
Another strategy is if you don't own a house, you buy a house, right? Because a house is an exempt asset. And there's other categories of exempt resources that we delineate in the book, and those really haven't changed. So again, what's appropriate for you? What isn't? What changes do you make in addition to changing the documents, getting somebody in the family involved? If you're going to think about gifting, you only do that if you have confidence that the recipient of the gift is going to be responsible. Yeah. There is elder abuse out there. I mean, let's face it. There are some people who take advantage of their family members. It's a fact of life. And with us, age wave, I mean, there's millions and millions of us. Some portion of us will have kids who are self-serving and are not going to take care of us, and they'll try to take our money. I mean, let's be blunt. So
all of us. Let's be clear here.
So That's why we do worry about people learning about some of these strategies and then doing it at home.
Yeah.
Maybe enough about that, but we just can't
Yeah.
overemphasize that
I,
whenever there's this idea of asset transfers, it's ripe for abuse, and we're extremely,
yes.
extremely careful about that.
And
We're
I
not,
just want to,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. I also want to point out you might not want Medi-Cal to be the source of payment. Some people say, I don't want to rely on that because if you give your money away, you better get Medi-Cal because you're out of money, right? And what if you can't find a Medi-Cal certified nursing home? So it might not be the right choice. Maybe it is the right choice just to pay out of pocket if you can be at a facility that's closer to you, if you think it's good. I think there's a misnomer. I think we've heard some attorneys or advisors say, "Oh, you never want to go to a Medi-Cal facility; those are terrible," and that's just not true. Like we've seen gold-plated nursing homes that are terrible and crappy-looking ones that are great, or they might switch places depending on the management team and the staff at that time. So it's so critical ahead of time to, if you have someone you love who's going to need this care, start visiting facilities, see if they have a waiting list, see if you can get in. But if they don't accept Medi-Cal, it's not an option. If you find the perfect place but they don't accept Medi-Cal, okay, maybe none of this makes sense. So make sure that it makes sense. But it takes some time to do all of this and to apply. And we talked. Let's just briefly. We've helped hundreds, maybe thousands of families with this. So we've been through almost every type of situation. But Mike, you flagged tax issues, right? So we talk about gifting, but what are the major tax issues you have to be aware of? For the first is estate tax. It's probably not an issue. It's a great problem to have if you have this issue. So if you are under the estate tax exemption limit, transfers will not incur any gift or estate tax. You can give up to $13.99 million away in 2025. It's going to go to $15 million next year. For a couple, that's $30 million next year. So if you're close to that, don't rely on Medi-Cal. Just pay out of pocket. Probably. I mean,
Right.
that's just not worth it. Um, but let's say you are not ultra high net worth, you're not in the tens of millions, and you want to transfer us. So we have to beware of capital gains taxes. So if you give away some of those non-exempt assets or stocks, and they've gone way up in value from what you bought them for, anything you give to your kids while you're living, your kids inherit your cost basis. So if you paid $10 a share for stock that's now worth 200, you sell it, you have a huge capital gains tax problem. If you give it to your kids now, they have the same problem if they ever sell it. If you just hold on to that, it goes to your kids after you pass away, they get a stepped up basis. Capital gains taxes go away. So you have to run these numbers. Is it worth transferring these assets given that maybe future capital gains tax hit?
And that also raises the issue of which assets. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
somebody is going to give away, my example, 100,000, if there's liquid assets over here, cash, and stock over here, given what Mark just said, the gift would typically be the cash, not the stock, because of the carryover basis. And basis is what you paid for it. Sell it for more, you have
Yeah.
profit, capital gains tax as a result.
And the house. So your primary residence is exempt, no matter what it's worth. As we talked about California, you can have a $10 million house, you're okay. Most states, it's capped at a much lower value. But you're not, so we're not worried about that. But what if you are fortunate enough to have another property, like a rental property? Well, that's not exempt. So should you just give that to your kids? Well, maybe that's a terrible idea because the moment you give it to them, we have Prop 19, property taxes will be fully reassessed. So the property tax could skyrocket by 1,000%. You lose the stepped up basis for that property for your kids. They would have gotten a stepped up cost basis if they gotten it after you passed away. So that can be worth a lot too. I mean, that can be worth, sometimes we don't want you to be in a position where you preserve some money, you get Medi-Cal sooner, but you gave up, $1 million in tax benefits you would have gotten. Like that's probably not a good trade-off. So we want to work on, we can help you with Prop 19, by the way. If you just have properties, you want to keep the property taxes low, it's a huge issue. It's kind of outside of the realm of Medi-Cal planning. We've helped many families with that. It's tricky to merge those two strategies together. But the bottom line is you have to be, we always counsel families about we look at your situation. We say, okay, given your situation, what types of transfers would make sense and what are the trade-offs? Sometimes we run the numbers and it doesn't make sense. It might have seemed to make great sense on the surface, but after we look at the tax exposure, you're not actually providing any benefit to your family by doing this. Any other closing thoughts about taxes before we sort of wrap things up?
Well, it underscores the need to get comprehensive advice from somebody who understands these tax issues. Prop 19 is a sleeper. People don't understand about it usually until it's too late. So we've done other webinars on that. Suffice to say that because that's a relatively new law in California, that's going to be part of the equation as we do our thinking and our advising about long-term care planning. And again, our goal here is not Medi-Cal planning. It's long-term care planning. Medi-Cal is something we have to advise you about, but it's one of many, many, many issues. The paramount being quality of care and quality of life to the max.
Yeah, and let's circle back to those 3 points I made. And I think there's different, as you said, Mike, long-term care planning. Our first priority is not saving money for your kids and grandkids. That's great if we can. It's about preserving your assets within your family so you get the best possible care. That's it. And so hopefully you got a lot of the strategies here, but I'm going to circle back to the three things I talked about before. Hope is not a strategy. Hope that everything works out, that you won't need long-term care, or that if you need it, we'll figure it out when we get there. It's not a strategy. This is your life. This is your parents' life. This is your grandparents' life and their quality of life. Make sure you talk about it ahead of time with your loved ones if you can, and come up with a plan. Make sure your estate plan is there, which relates to part two, control what you can control. Start talking, make sure your plan's up to date, be aware of these rules. If it's time to start maybe considering strategies to transfer money within your family, do it. These are high leverage decisions, where you decide where you're going to go when you need longer term care. I have many clients that I've worked with for years, and they're really worried about this. And they're now looking at, before they absolutely need it, they're starting to tour facilities themselves. And they're saying, oh, well, this place, it looks great, but we actually hated it when we spent some time there. This place didn't seem as good at first, but we actually loved the community there. So start planning ahead, and talk to your family. And I think there's a lot more that we can do than we think. And really quickly, if you haven't followed us, if you want to stay in touch with us, you can follow us on YouTube, Gilfix Law. If you're watching this on YouTube, like, share this, comment. I'm on Instagram too, at Mark Gilfix. Join our mailing list at gilfix.com. But what can we do right now? So we talked about a lot, but I think that the most powerful thing you can do is just make sure that you're up to date. Contact us. Gilfix.com. We have limited availability before the end of the year. We don't have tons of openings. We might not be able to help everybody who wants to try to do transfers before the end of the year. But we would love to get the chance. If you're an existing client, maybe it's time to take a fresh look at this. It can be a meeting with me or Mike or with Jeff Mendelman or Joshua LaPole.
Well, Mark, let me say, okay, I looked at your calendar today. Okay.
Yes.
For the next 2 or 3 weeks, you are booked. Okay. I am similar. So there shouldn't be an expectation that one of us will definitely be available next week. We have Joshua and Jeff will have more available calendars. So, but all of us work on these issues. Yeah. We plan together. We develop plans that make sense, and I tend to review all of them.
Yeah, so I think that's the key point, is that if we are booked up, like if you, like, Mark's not available for 2 or 3 weeks, but you need, like, Jeff Mendelman on our team, Joshua LaPole are awesome. And every time there's a Medi-Cal issue, I can tell you, we meet as a team. It's not just one person running off and doing it. When you work with us at Gilfix and the Pole, you are working with all of us as a team. So, and what maybe you don't see something urgent now, well, then meet with us the next few weeks or next couple of months to make sure your core estate plan is up to date. By the way, we're going to our questions in just a moment. So, we hope we can help you. If you're facing this as an urgent issue, set that meeting right away, so we can get to you before the end of the year. If you're watching this later, just set a meeting when it's time. But
for next year.
Yeah, let's now go to some questions here. So we're going to go to questions now in just a moment. We have quite a few, but I hope you got a lot out of that. Share this with someone who needs to see this. If it's your parents, your grandparents, someone in your friend group who is dealing with this, share it with them. I think there's so much ignorance out there. There's so much more that we can do than we think. So. Kids, talk to your parents about this. Parents, talk to your kids about this. Let's make sure we're all informed as we face these major challenges. There's so much more we can do than we think. So let's get to some questions.
Mike, I'll go first. Okay.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. I'll just say from Tree.
Good questions.
I'll just say they're beyond a quick 30-second response, especially the one that deals with which assets. So there's so much in the questions where an individual is eligible but worried about next year having many assets. Selling certain assets again. There's a capital gains tax analysis you have to look at. Sometimes the child makes a loan to a parent. So it goes on and on with the issues. Trey, I'm sorry.
Well, people can't see this question, so let me just say it's a question about if we're eligible now, but we're over the limit next year, kind of high level, what can we do? And I think it's complicated. We'd have to talk about it. Some transfers probably would have to take place with those tax implications brought up with the special needs trust idea. Maybe part of that. We have a good question here. When does the redetermination take place?
Yeah, it's typically a year. again, that's been the case. Well, whether it will be the case into the future, whether they will, because of the law change, whether they'll try to accelerate and do some sooner, we don't know. There's a whole lot out of our control, needless to say. But typically, it's a year after the date of eligibility.
Good, and a good question here. If I have a special needs trust for my disabled adult child, how do I protect that? Well, that's actually a nice area. So historically, at least, we talked about these transfer penalties. If you gave too much at one time, you lose eligibility for Medi-Cal. There's been an exemption for transfers to a special needs trust for a child with a disability where there were no penalties. So you could give away $1 million to a special needs trust and not have a period of ineligibility. So I don't know if we're certain that that will be coming back next year.
That's in federal law. That should be intact.
Okay.
It's one of the many additional points that we didn't get into today. You know,
Yeah.
we did a super summary. Please understand that. Please understand that.
That's a good
great
reminder.
question about that. Okay.
Another question. Mike, why don't you go to the next one?
Yeah. Your daughter is 17, enrolled in Medi-Cal, no assets, but she lives with you. Will your assets affect her eligibility? No, once she's 18, she'd apply. She might also receive, by the way, SSI, Supplemental Security Income, as an income program. So no, it shouldn't interfere with eligibility.
Oh, and just to be clear, this presentation was on Medi-Cal in the long-term care context. There are different categories that what we talked about today is not relevant. So let's just be clear here. That's kind of a different subject. Another question, very simple answer to this one. If you have a rental home, does that count as an asset? Yes, it does. Absolutely, it does.
And what's interesting about a rental home, here we go. I have to keep saying historically, the way the Medi-Cal program has looked at the value of real property is by looking at the assessed value, which is what generates your property taxes, right? So if you bought a property years and years and years ago for $100,000, and that's the assessed value, historically, that's the value that the Medi-Cal program places on that property. So that could, even though the property might be worth $1.2 million, that could fit under the $130,000. I mean, it's amazing. So that's in addition to the exempt residence. So rental properties have implications for Proposition 19 and property tax planning that could dwarf the Medi-Cal issue here. So all these things interplay.
So this is a good point from Linda. Linda says that in San Francisco, IHSS pays the IHSS worker, if you're eligible for this program, $22 an hour.
That's great. I didn't know
that's
that.
Great. I mean,
more than I thought.
In the Bay Area, I'm not really sure, how much that can help people live, but no, but it's certainly a lot better than not getting help. So, from Lisa, is the asset limit increased for the healthy spouse under enhanced spousal impoverishment protection from 65 to 157,920? Mike, any thoughts about the question about how much a spouse at home can keep?
Right. I mean, historically, it's been the case that the spouse also gets to retain a significant number of dollars for herself, and that's been also exempt. And that number, I think, might be a little bit out of date. But again, I think the new rules say something different, unless there's a development of which I'm unaware. And we're tracking what DHS, the Department of Health Services, Medi-Cal, we track everything they're doing to see if there's any developments. But we think it's going to be, it'll be 65 plus 130, so it ends up being more. It ends up being more.
Yeah.
We'll track it. We'll know for sure.
Question from Jeff. What about donating assets to charity?
No deal. A gift is a gift. A gift is, whether it's to a charity or a person, a transfer is going to create the issue of losing eligibility.
Are disbursements from a special needs trust considered income for the beneficiary who might need Medi-Cal?
No, because a proper distribution from a special needs trust doesn't go to the individual as income. That the trust is paying that person's bills, and it's not going to count as income. You have to manage those trust assets very, very carefully.
So it's a question of managing the special needs trust. So if it was done wrong, it could cause problems, but there's ways to avoid that. Good question from Donna. Donna, is the car also exempt in 20? Yes, you can have one car.
Just one car.
An exempt asset. So you may have to sell the old Volkswagen.
Very good question. What about a Roth IRA? Because there is no RMD. There's no required minimum distribution with a Roth. We believe, here we go, can't guarantee it because we have to see how they interpret it, that as long as you do take distributions from the Roth, we think you're going to be okay. It's not mandated, but if you're so we would advise that a person actually take distributions. They can be modest, but takes distributions, and we believe tentatively, subject to a review of new policies, that the Roth IRA is going to be okay, but it's not a lock for reasons stated.
Will this recording be available to share on YouTube? Yes, we're going to post this on YouTube. So please do share this. If you're watching on YouTube, please share it. Mary has a good question. Do we need to sell stock before transferring it to kids or to a special needs trust? No, you do not. So you can transfer stock as it is. You could sell it if you want. You might have capital gains tax hit, but that's totally fine. Just the value of the stock and the day you give it away is the value that the value of the gift as it pertains to Medi-Cal eligibility. Or Mike, do you have any?
Yeah. Oh boy, I almost hate to
Well,
say
no,
that, but
we don't have time to get into too many
yeah,
details.
never mind.
But
There's some more
yeah,
sophisticated planning options there. I'll leave it at that.
potentially, yeah. Oops, looks like there's an error maybe with a Gilfix.com My Needs link. Contact Gilfix.com. Sorry, that link may be out of date, but Gilfix.com, or you can call us at 650-493-8070. I think we have a different number on our website too that also
I
works.
think a phone
So bottom
call is
line,
the best.
yeah, Gilfix.com is great. And you can call us again, 650-493-8070 is a great way to do it. Another question from Mary. When we pass away, does the stock that my kids inherit get a stepped up basis? Well, if you gave it to them while you were alive, they do not get a stepped up basis. Whatever your cost for the stock was, that's what they have to report as their cost basis. If they sell it, they have to pay the same capital gains tax bill you would have had if you had sold it yourself. If, however, it's in your name, in your estate when you pass away, and it goes to your kids after you pass away, they do get the stepped up basis. Capital gains taxes are wiped away. This goes back to, hey, when we're talking about Medi-Cal planning, making these gifts, is it even wise? Maybe we save $150,000 in long-term care costs, but our kids are now going to get hit with the $400,000 capital gains tax bill. So, these are very good questions. Yeah, so we have. So I think that's all part of the planning. A lot of people come to us, they say, I want a Medi-Cal plan, and we eventually look at it, we're like, doesn't make sense. Let's, or maybe we find a different approach. But set a time with us if you want to explore this. We're going to help as many people as we can before the end of the year. But even if not, unless it's happening right now,
plenty of time.
There's plenty of time. And even if you do it now, there's going to be issues next year. The rules are changing. We're not sure exactly how things will shake out yet. There's going to be more changes, so stay tuned for more. We're going to keep an eye on things as they evolve. We cannot predict how federal laws get impact California. There could be changes we didn't talk about today. This was our best understanding right now, but it's a moving target. Medi-Cal for billionaires is probably gone forever, but there are still a lot of ways you can protect assets. So a lot there. So I think on that note, let's wrap things up. So thank you, everybody. Follow us at Gilfix Law on YouTube. Follow me on Instagram, doing short videos there, at Mark Gilfix. But either way, stay in touch with us, set a meeting with us. If you're an existing client, you're not sure about this, we can take a fresh look, make sure your documents are up to date, that they have these powers. If you haven't worked with us, you may need to do an updated estate plan, even if you think it's good right now, because it may not address long-term care Medi-Cal asset protection tools. And let's talk about this. Let's have a conversation. Tell your kids, your lawyer, or your online lawyer advisors, educators. Sorry, we're not your lawyers if we don't work with you, but your online legal educators told you to talk about these issues, just as we do. We talk about it as a family, and probably we're due for another talk, Dad, about your current thinking. So I know I get a lot of peace when I talk to my parents about it, to just, what do you guys want? What's important to you? And I think kids out there, adult children of your parents or grandparents, it's so good to talk to your loved ones about this, and just it gives me peace to know if I can do this, I am doing right by my parents. It's a really hard thing, and it's really hard when you don't even know what your parents would want. So let's all communicate and work together, and I hope everybody stays safe, sane, and healthy. Mike, any final thoughts?
No, well said. Us elders, we're aware of it, we worry about it. I don't think we talk about it enough with our family members. I don't think we do enough planning. So many of us we put our heads in the sand. I'm different. I won't need that. Yep. Yeah, you will. Yes, I will.
Well, I'm not happy to, but let's all stay healthy, and let's stay together as families, and do everything we can to support each other. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.